Trevor Gordon, Associate Pastor at Central Canaan Christian Church.
I'm Ray Guerra. I am a co-founder of Love, Latinos Engaged, United, and Voting.
Rob Arteaga, I'm a psychotherapist.
And my name is Angie, and I'm a small business owner here in the Houston area.
No last name today?
Angie Guajardo.
All right, so what we're going to talk about today is the elections coming up tomorrow, November the 6th, here in the United States. Maybe when you actually watch this, it'll be after the election, so who knows what you're actually going to hear tonight, because nothing is planned, and we're going to just talk candidly about what's really going on. But hopefully, if you're watching live right now, we want you to make sure you join us. We're going to put the phone number on the screen. We want you to join us and call in. We want to hear your opinions and see what's really going on out there for you. Next thing, also, the people on the panel, they're very diverse. You have everything from extreme liberals to extreme Republicans. You just don't know which one's which, because at the end of the day, we all are family, right?
That's right.
So let's get this going. Current events, what's going on out there?
Well, let's give it up for the Houston Texans.
That's right.
Oh, yeah.
They are 7-1, first time in the history of the Texans. And, of course, Buffalo, they had Mr. Williams, the defensive end from
Mario Williams.
Mario Williams came home. And this is the first time he played against the Texans. And I'll tell you what, I am very proud of the Texans. What about you?
All right, so am I. I was so excited to actually, this is going to sound crazy, I don't watch the games, because the one time I sat down and actually watched the game, they lost. So I said, no, I will not watch any more games. I'll just read it on the phone and say, okay, we're winning. It's good.
Well, I'm excited about the free slush that we're going to get tomorrow at Sonic. Right. As a result of the win. That's what I'm excited about with the Texans.
Plug-in the song.
You know, I had never been to a Texans game. I went recently against Green Bay, and that's the only Texans game I have ever been to, and that's the one they lost.
You can't go to any more
So
games.
I'm not allowed to go to any more
You
Texans
can't
games.
I'll tell you what, I'm excited for them. It's now time for the Dallas Cowboy fans that are still here in Houston, Texas, to convert, because we're going to the Super Bowl, and I'm excited about the next game as well. I mean, Chicago is 7-1, Houston Texans 7-1. It's going to be a good game. Looking forward to it.
I think you have to point out the fact, too, that Arian Foster's the best running back in the NFL, and he's half Mexican. So we
A
have
lot
to
of
give him
people don't
props.
realize that.
A lot of people
His
don't realize
mom
that.
is Hispanic, and his dad was African American. So I guess that makes him 50% Latino.
We're all mixed with something. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, come on.
We're all mud somewhere.
The other top story was Hurricane Sandy. As you all know, New York, New Jersey, a couple other states on the East Coast, severely hit by Hurricane Sandy. This is the first major storm that they've had, like they had in Hurricane Ike, Hurricane Katrina, Hurricane Rita. So it's kind of interesting, the dynamics. You have the Mayor Bloomberg, you have the Governor Christie, that are having some difficult situations because of the residents.
Well, there's a lot of people who, of course, they're not accustomed to this. Red Cross just came out today or yesterday and talked about the problems they're experiencing dealing with the stress of the storm. And then another thing that I found interesting, I don't know what you guys think about this, Governor Christie recently stated that people could vote by email or fax as it relates to their vote for president of the United States. And I don't know what to think about that. I think it leads to some potential shenanigans going on there. I don't know.
Voter fraud.
Voter fraud.
I agree. I agree. I don't think if you're behind the fax machine and you're going to vote for me, I can't see how that would work.
Yeah.
No, I disagree. I mean, we're in the modern day and age. Why can't we evolve and finally start voting online? I mean, we do everything else online. We commit ourselves. We can buy cars. We can buy insurance. We can buy everything online. Why can't we vote?
But how do you validate that?
Well, how do we validate a loan against our record?
Well, I think the problem is, you know, I mean, how do you deal with potential voter fraud or issues that, as it relates to some problems that come with the email coming in or a fax coming in? I mean, how do you actually check that in time to crown the winner of that state and those electoral votes?
Those are real issues, but you got to remember that we vote by mail also, mail ballot.
Yeah.
How do you verify it's the actual person that's voting? You don't.
You don't.
You don't. So and a lot of the process that we follow is really based on people that have good morals, and hopefully they follow those morals. So you can't say that because it's a fax or because an email, it shouldn't count. We're already doing it. We're so far behind in technology, the way we vote. We're backwards. You look at some of these other countries, they're voting by email. They go online and click their information and boom, it's done. Why can't we do that?
It
I think
doesn't
it's-
matter. It all depends on Ohio, anyways.
I think that just like there's business transactions that we can do that require security, there has to be some way where we can verify who is what voter so that we can get that way. Because you're right. I mean, we are pretty behind. If we can do financial transactions securely, why can't we vote?
I guess that's the thing, you know, do you want this major presidential election to be your guinea pig moment to test to see if it's going to be effective, especially with the issues related to cybersecurity?
I agree. I don't think we want a guinea pig moment. I do agree that there can be securities put into place so that we can ensure the validation of a vote.
But you don't do it a week before.
No,
you don't do it a week
definitely
before
not.
a
Not now,
presidential
but I'm
election.
talking about the next election. We've already had
Oh, yeah.
gatekeeping moments. You know, those E-Slate machines. You've seen those plenty of movies about how those things can be controlled too. We don't get a receipt to prove how we actually voted. We just get something to say, congratulations, you voted. How do we really know it would actually count to how we say we're going to do it?
Yeah, I
That's
think
true.
it'd be something good for future elections. It's just, like he said, a week before,
Yeah, they
you know,
start
you don't want
now
to
for
say,
the
hey,
next
this is what we're going to do.
Right.
Surprise, you know, you can vote by email now.
Well, let's go on to the next story. Big headlines in front of the Houston Chronicle, front page yesterday. HISD board member basically was being accused of bribery. Bottom line, corruption. Is that anything new for HISD?
Well, with that particular individual, it's not. I mean, it's a story that's been going on and on and on. But I think I found it interesting that the story hit again the day before the bond elections, you know, which I think we're going to be talking about today. But I think it does, you know, lend some credence to, you know, what's really going on and what's going to happen with these bond dollars once they're allocated, if approved by the voters.
Well, I'll tell you what, these stories have been coming out on a regular basis. We saw it 2 months ago, and we saw it a month before that. There's some issues there with Larry Marshall. I got to say it, you know, if you have people over and over and over again talking about the corruption with Larry Marshall, there's something there. Where there's smoke, there's fire.
Exactly.
Well, and I think that the bottom line is that voter trust is affected, because I wish that HISD officials were here like last week, where they could defend themselves, because we're just hearing that bad side. But I'm sure that there's a lot of other measures like they were talking about last week, where there's transparency in the processes to have the contractors contracted. And so I just wish that we had the other side so we can hear from them, because, I mean, unfortunately, we're just hearing that fraud side of things, and I wish that we could hear the other side of the story too.
And make no mistake about it, it's not just Larry Marshall. You know, I mean, he's the person that is being talked about now, but I'm almost certain, like you say, where there's smoke, there's fire. There may be other individuals that'll also be talked about here in the near future. But I guess it boils back to, you know, do voters really trust HISD trustees or any elected officials to handle, especially in this bond election? You're talking about $1.9 billion. That's not anything to sneeze at.
We can talk all the whatever you want to call it we want, but what we're really talking about is purchasing law. And if you want to have a conversation about purchasing law, we can do that, because there's a big distinction in what we're talking about. We're talking about an elected official, and we're talking about the connection with an individual who was awarded a contract through several layers of vetting. It isn't a direct contract. No elected official has, let me take that back. Very few elected officials have the true power to give a direct contract in accordance to purchasing law. Because now that's what's happening with the HISD or any school district. We're talking about one school district out of what, 200-300 in the state. You know, he doesn't award contracts. Someone inside the department, the purchasing director, the individual in charge of those contracts, the person who actually reviewed all the bids or the no bid contracts, did that, not him.
And he's one vote. I mean, you know,
One vote.
I mean, you know, he's one vote.
Well, I disagree with that.
Okay.
He has the leverage of other board members. So he's more than one vote, because he's been there a long time.
Now you're mixing apples and oranges. He is
hold
one
on,
vote.
Hold on, let me finish. He has influence. Let's put it that way. He
So
may
he's-
have one vote.
so you
but
believe
has
he's bribing
No,
or
Are you
influencing?
accusing him?
heavily?
No.
Let me hear me out.
Okay, here you are. Let's go.
You have a board member that has been there a long time. He has influence, okay? Whether it be board members, whether it be staff, he has influence, okay? So when you're an influencer and you're able to make things happen, then, you know, there was some money exchanged. Don't get me wrong. There was some money exchanged, and it's very evident in the court records. they state very clearly the money went from here to his pocket. Okay.
Through his campaign,
So-
through a
His
so-
PAC?
pocket.
so-
Very
How do you know
clear.
it was illegal?
Through
Very
his
clear.
campaign, there was a $25,000 check that was not accounted for that was supposed to be an honest mistake. $25,000 is not a small check. How does that just slip through somebody's cracks or slip through somebody's hands without being
So
accounted
the question is, you mentioned influence. What kind of influence could one man who's been there for some time have on other individuals who have a responsibility to represent the constituents and do what's right?
That's right.
And sometimes it takes only one vote to make things happen. As you know, if you have a board of 9, all you need is 5 votes. Okay? So one vote is very significant. But the point is, he brought up a very good point. $25,000 went from the contractor to a middle person to his pocket. Okay? And
for.
she clearly
This
stated,
was a contribution to his campaign.
she clearly stated, okay, that she was giving him some money for so-called advice,
Mentorship.
mentorship. Okay?
Or consulting
come
services.
on. Do you get $25,000 for mentorship? Do you
Definitely
get $25,000 for
Well, there's
mentorship?
If I do,
consultants
I'm
that make more
definitely
money.
going to
I sure do.
Those
produce a
the
receipt.
campaign managers, they make 25 grand and more just running campaigns.
Bottom line is,
I mean, that happens all the time. So
bottom line, where there's smoke, there's fire.
No. What
So-
we're talking
so
about
I
is
guess-
purchasing law. We're
we
talking
got to look
about
at
two
the
totally
facts
different
here.
things.
Yeah.
Right. Well, of course, all that'll be settled in the court of law. But I guess my question, going back to your point, is how does that one individual influence 4 other individuals to vote in his direction? What kind of influence can that person have? What do they do? Do they?
I can't tell you specifically who he's influenced, but when you have a sitting board member that's been there a long time, and everybody knows it at HISD that he's an influential guy. No questions about it, okay? And when you want to vote pass, you go to him and try to get his support. You always have people like that on council and school boards as well.
So I think there's a simple solution to it. Just say anybody who has a contract in any district or any organization that cannot directly or indirectly contribute to the elected officials. Now that would find us different ways.
Well,
of-
that's in the Texas Ethic
No,
Code
it's not.
anyway.
No.
not illegal.
Well, you know, if you talk about HISD, I mean, this happens across the board with a lot of public entities.
Yep.
I mean, it happens at Houston Community College.
agree.
You know, it happens at the, Port of Houston. I mean, it happens wherever individuals have decision-making power on taxpayer dollars and taxpayer money. So I guess what I'm not hearing though is where is the influence from one person to those individuals? Are you saying they're just that gullible or that afraid of a
I don't think
tenured
that it's
person?
just the influence over those individuals, but you can also influence the contractor, because if anybody has ever tried to get a contract with any kind of government entity, you know that it's a rigorous process. So you do not only can influence the voters, but you can influence how those people apply for that, and you can very well tell them you take steps A, B, and C so you can look better when it comes to the board.
Then let me tell you this: the person who gives the contracts, from personal experience, does everything they can to CYA.
Exactly.
Okay? Trust me, I know.
This is the marriage counselor talking. This is Dr. Feelgood.
No, but it's not seriously. A person who has the authority to issue a contract, make sure they cover every single base before that contract's issued.
Well, that's because the focus comes to that person first.
That's right.
And then it goes backwards. And I believe that's how this happened. So you start to you look at the first person, and if that person has covered dotted all their I's and crossed all their T's, then you go to the next person down the line. And I think that not just within HISD, but school boards across Texas, this could possibly.
I think
be
that goes everywhere across the board. But I think we need to wrap this section up.
Nonetheless, it's be interesting to see what happens in court.
Okay, well, let's do this. We're going to go to a very quick break, and we're going to come back with one more guest who's going to join us, and then we're going to get into the meat and potatoes of the show. All right, you're watching Latino Talk TV. We'll be right back. Can you take off? watching Latino Talk TV here at Houston Media Source in Houston, Texas. So, we're going to get into it. Hector Carreño, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
All right.
I just want to set the record straight. You guys were talking a lot about the Texans in the first half. The Chicago Bears beat the former Oilers 51-20, and they are going to beat the Texans next Sunday. So now we can start. I just wanted to throw some fighting words down.
And on that note, let's take a quick break now. I'm just kidding.
He must have got a $25,000 check.
Get a receipt for that?
On several.
On several, okay. On that note, all right, let's start the
Bond election.
the discussions on the bond elections. Go backwards on the ballot here in Harris County. First ballot.
Well, I'll tell you what, my opinion, I don't know about you all, is that we need to vote for the bond election. Vote yes. We need better schools, and of course, it creates jobs, economic development. So what better way to promote jobs than to have a $1.89 billion to build schools?
I think this goes back to the discussion we were having. We didn't talk about the constituents or the voters, right? And so I think a lot of people were very unhappy with the way the bond election came about. But you can't argue that the schools need money, the children need money. Education is being destroyed in Texas right now, so we need to do something about it. But I think it's a mistake if we pass this bond election, but we go away and we don't hold HISD accountable to what they do with the money afterwards. So I think we have to, as leaders in the community, we have to really pay attention to where this money is going and make sure it's being spent correctly.
So are you for or against the bond?
I am for the bond, reluctantly for the bond.
Anybody against it?
Yes.
Anybody against the bond?
Well, I am against the bond. I agree with Dr. Garrett. There has to be a level of accountability. And accountability has never reached the level in which it needs to be. $1.9 billion. That's a lot of money. How many schools have been promised money that never received it? How many schools need to be demolished and built from the ground up? There are so many. There's a school over that I pass by several times a week, and this school just finished being rebuilt. But they have a large sign in front of it, and it says $45.1 million will be awarded to this school if the bond passes. I can't see that.
I personally think I voted for. I did. But what's the point of having better schools if we lack proper administration and more dedicated teachers?
I agree.
Well,
It doesn't matter how great of a school you have. The system, the educational system itself needs to be better.
Well, if the infrastructure of the school is, studies show that if the infrastructure of the school is improved, then students improve independent controlling for the quality of the teachers, right? So I think quality of education will increase, but I think we also need to focus on that problem as well, right?
Well, I wrote a front page story about this a couple of weeks ago in the Houston Forward Times, and one of the major issues that the African American community has had is the fact that we've gotten calls from individuals who have stated that they hadn't gotten enough information about the bonds, and before you knew it, they were asked to vote on $2.7 billion worth of bonds, most of which involve taxpayer increases. And they did not know a lot of information. And so, yeah, some of the entities did some drive-by meetings where they would stop at a school here or a church here or places there. But from an educational standpoint, a lot of people didn't get it. Now, let me just preface, I'm pro-business. I'm the founder of Texas Business Alliance, and I'm also pro-education. And I believe that those students deserve better. What you find is, in a lot of the questions that were raised, is you have a school like Grimes Elementary in the African-American community who was promised taxpayer dollars in the last bond election, and the school was closed. It was closed, and those taxpayer dollars, much of those taxpayer dollars were unaccounted for. So the question was, where did those dollars go? And they were promised that when that bond passed, they would rebuild a new Grimes Elementary. And there were several other schools. Worthing High School, for example, in the last bond election was promised to have their school built. They're just now breaking ground on building the school 4 or 5 years later to build the school. And they're asking for dollars for Worthing again in this bond election. So there's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of confusion out there, and a lot of people feel that African Americans, because they believe that they're going to come out heavy and vote for President Obama, that they're just going to vote for those bonds because they're going to vote, you know, in a naive fashion for President Obama. And so while I do believe that the dollars are needed for the revamping of schools and whatnot, just for that particular piece, there are a lot of issues in the communities that need to be addressed as well and questions asked.
You know, I think I've been hearing this conversation for a while. I think we're micromanaging. We live in a representative democracy, and we elect people to make decisions for us at various levels of government. At the Houston Independent School District, we elect the Board of Trustees. If you think they're not doing their job, let's vote them out. Let's elect different people. There has to be transparency. There needs to be transparency in all levels of government. That's what makes government work in America. And when things are done in back rooms and shady deals and handshakes and commitments, and then they don't come to fruition, communities get upset, rightfully so. But I think we need to think about what's in the best interest of the community as a whole. The HISD bonds are needed because some of these buildings are 80 and 90 years old and the infrastructure is falling apart. The bathrooms are horrible. We need to give kids better facilities to learn. We also need better teachers, and we need to put more money in all kinds of things, but we need to start and put the first foundation down. So $1.8 billion seems like a lot of money, but in my opinion, it's very little money for the future of our children. And if we think that, as you said, Dr. Guerra, that you're in favor of it reluctantly because you don't like some of the things that are going on, that is not HISD, that's the trustees. So if we don't trust the trustees, we need to figure out who the trustees are that we don't think are representing the best interests of our community and vote them out. It's as simple as that. In every election, every vote counts. You know, and people who vote and stand up and say, I'm going to participate, are the ones who are making all the decisions. There are a lot of people watching this program tonight who aren't going to vote. There are record numbers of early voting going on, but tomorrow or Wednesday morning, we're going to hear that 40 or 50% of the populace who are registered to vote are not going to turn out and vote. That's the crime. Because those are the people who are being impacted the most, and they're not, and their voices aren't being heard. So I agree. I think we need to support the bonds. I voted for the bonds. I think we need to be able to push the HISD bonds because they're desperately needed. But we also need to understand that we do live in a representative democracy, and we elect people to make decisions for us. And if we don't like those people, the decisions that those people are making, this is very simple. This isn't the Soviet Union where somebody gets in the Politburo and they're there until they drop dead. Here there's an election, usually every year. You may be up every 2 years or every 4 years or every 6 years, but if you don't like what somebody's doing, vote them out.
I think that Hector makes a great point, and I totally agree with that. The only thing that I'd have to say to your point is that you're not doing us a favor as an elected official. It's your money. So you're being asked to vote on a tax increase on your dollars. So as a taxpayer, it's your right to say, I want you to increase these dollars because I believe you're going to do a great job as my representative, or I'm not going to vote for the bonds because I don't believe you're going to do a good job. But this is not an election about trustees. It's an election about tax increases and about your dollars and how they're going to be spent.
Well, the bond election is not a tax increase, right? It could potentially be a tax increase, but if the growth remains the same, then there's going to be a zero tax increase.
Well, in HISD's case, there will be a tax increase, roughly $70 per household.
If the growth, they project the growth to be 1.5%,
right,
but the growth's been 5% for
higher,
years, right?
or
higher. So if we maintain the same growth that we have right now, there will not be a tax increase, but they had to use conservative numbers whenever they were coming up with the numbers.
Yeah,
right?
my granddaddy told me once, if was a fifth, we'd all be drunk. So, so we can say if it goes up or if it doesn't go up. The bottom line is, if you pass the bond, the potential of a tax increase is there. So I guess my point is, this is not a referendum on who's representing us best and who's not. It's about whether we want.
That's not what I meant.
No, I know you're not. I'm just speaking. I'm just saying.
You know, I agree with Hector as well. However, I believe that a trustee should be trusted. And I believe that when that person is in that position to make those decisions, I should be able to trust that person. But when I look at the history of the monies and how they've been utilized and how they may disappear and how this school or that school doesn't get what it's been promised, and then another referendum comes around to ask for more money and that school's on the list again, that tells me that something's not right.
But the burden is on us as citizens. If we don't take the time to, in essence, audit what our elected officials are doing, we have to remember that they work for us. We don't work for them.
That's right.
Okay? And if we don't watch what they're doing and hold them accountable and saying, you said you were going to do this, but you did that. And if we don't call them out on it, and then it's up to us. We're the ones at fault.
I
not
agree
them.
with you 100%.
So on that note, we actually need to disappear for like 2 seconds. We have a little technical issue we're going to deal with right now. We'll be right back. You're watching Latino Talk TV. Latino Talk TV. Your host, Jose Jimenez. We have now Bishop Dixon with us. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Thank you so much. And we're actually going to keep going right now with the discussion at hand. We're going to finish out real quick with HISD. So where are we at with HISD? Bishop, you going to chime in?
Well, I tell you, nearly $1.9 billion, so much money that's going to be led into our community. And so there's so much reason, there's such a great reason for us to work together collaboratively. I think the most positive thing that's happened so far is the coalition that's taken place between the African American, Asian, and Latino communities, our business leaders coming together to make sure that there's a fair and equitable process, a transparent process. The numbers from the 2008 bond were dismal and quite frankly embarrassing and should not be acceptable to any of us. And the meetings that we've had recently, I think, have been going in the right direction, would you say, Ben? But I think that we've got to make sure that we stay together and that, after the election, we work together to ensure that participation is at a decent level. Okay. In fact, decent is not acceptable. I think we should be looking for something that's more viable than that.
Okay. The bishop referenced the press conference earlier today where we had the Asian Hispanic Chamber, the Asian Chamber, the Hispanic Chamber, and the African American Chamber come together in favor of the bond election. It's great to see the working together, the cohesiveness. I tell you what, I would say that working together will take us a lot further than fighting amongst each other.
Sure.
And we showed that we can come together. There are some issues that we can work together at HISD, especially with contracts.
Yes.
You had mentioned that there has been some low numbers for minority participation on these contracts in the past, and I definitely agree that we need to increase those numbers. But the only way we're going to be able to do that is if we make sure HISD board members are accountable.
That's right.
And they have not been held accountable in the past.
That's right.
And they need to be held accountable for the whole pie, not just for the minority piece that they want minorities to fight over. There's a lot of money out there that a lot of qualified minority firms can go after as a prime contractor, working together or solo, as opposed to just fighting over the crumbs from the table.
We're talking about all kinds of stuff here, but the truth is purchasing law has not been changed and the same rules still apply. So no matter how much we talk about trustees or whatever elected official, how many bonds we pass, the way to award a contract is still the same. There's still no bid contracts at certain dollar amounts, and those things are all the same.
And at the end, it doesn't matter. You mentioned vote people out, vote people in. Yes, they promise, they say they're going to do and not do. But once they get there, whoever it is, the problem is, do they do the right thing? Do they do what they said they were going to do? Do they come through like they promised their people that they were going to do?
There are oversight committees for every dollar that's spent in our country. And I don't see why there couldn't be an oversight committee for HISD spending.
Well, that's exactly what we've already put on the table. The President Oversight Committee, though, was elected by HISD. And so what we have already put on the table, and we've gotten a verbal agreement from the superintendent, that there needs to be a new committee formed, and this committee cannot be appointed by HISD. This has to be a community-based committee that is comprised of competent individuals who understand the workings of contractual agreements of procurement and are able to report back to the community and hold HISD accountable. But I agree with Ben, we've got to hold the board members accountable as well.
Absolutely.
But I think we can do that. I don't understand why we can't, 2 weeks from now, have a meeting with a board member at a time to discuss, here are our concerns, here are our issues, do you agree to these things?
Bishop, I'd be willing to have that meeting with you. If you set that up, I'll join you.
I'll definitely call you. Let's make it happen.
I want to change the rules. Okay, we can talk about all this all we want, but the rules are still the same.
Right.
The rules are still the same.
And
no big contracts are the same.
You know what? Let me educate some of our listeners. One of the problems that we have, let's say we have a $1 million contract, and let's just say $300,000 supposedly is going to go to an African-American company, okay? Now, that's part of the contract process. As you mentioned, it's a see-through process. But what happens is this $1 million contract does not, the contractor does not give that $300,000 to the subcontractor. They don't follow through with their commitment, okay? And they do the work in-house, perhaps. So what happens when the main contractor does not fulfill their contract?
That's why the oversight committee has to be there, and there has to be also a compliance officer.
Absolutely.
You've got to, Metro is working right now. I have to say that the improvement at Metro, as it relates to minority and small business owners getting decent opportunity and fair opportunity, came about because there is a compliance officer that happens to be Darrell King's company, Quality. I can't think of the name of it. But they are overseeing
Principal Partner
Group. They are overseeing that entire concept and process. Well, as a result of that, you're not hearing small businesses complain about that as much anymore because the process is being executed by a firm that's independent of Metro. And I think that that's what has to happen at HISD. This is almost $2 billion. And if we don't make sure that the processes are in place, as you're saying, Jose, that deal with the whole purchasing situation, we're going to be in bad shape. And Ben, you're right, but even at Minute Maid Park, the excuses were made about small businesses not being able to be bonded. Well, there are ways to break contracts down. If you got the right kind of strategic partners at the table, a $10 million project can be broken down into 5 parcels so that small businesses can play a major role. And then finally, now I'll be quiet, we've got to have construction management partners at the very top. It cannot be all subcontractual relationships. We've got to have construction management teams at the very top of this process so that from A to Z, there's transparency and there's knowledge about it.
And at the end of the day, the trustees are the ones who sign off on these contracts. And you have a lot of individuals who have gotten contracts that didn't deserve contracts through HISD, that have never built a school in their lives, but because they cut a check, they were able to get in on the business, and so
and you know this.
And
how do you know this?
Because I look at the records.
Yeah.
I know. Matter of fact, I did a story about one of them that we talked about earlier in our story. But the bottom line is, you know, you have trustees and prime contractors who bid on work, and it could be $500,000 or so more than the lowest bid or the best qualified company, but yet because they have contributed to the campaign or whatnot, that particular person is the one.
But this all gets
back
back
to
to
the
what we were
rules.
talking about.
The rules need to change.
Transparency and accountability is what's
Exactly.
needed,
Yes.
and it's up to us to hold people accountable.
Absolutely.
We're waiting for in the case of HISD for the trustees to hold themselves accountable. That's never going to happen in a million years.
No.
We need to hold them accountable.
They're elected by the public.
Exactly.
So the question
And we can
that I
unelect
have,
them.
Yes,
How
exactly.
how do you hold them accountable though? That's the question. How do we as
We
citizens
stay informed.
I think we have to have a community-appointed oversight committee.
I agree.
And you change the rules of the game.
You change the rules,
Exactly.
yes.
You gotta change the
Yes.
rules
like
of the game.
that word
Absolutely.
rules, huh?
It's the rules. I mean, I had
changing it.
I know the metro rules. I know the county rules, and I tell you what, there's more independent signing authority at every level than you realize.
That's right.
There are hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars that are signed off with no question, and it's all legal.
Can I point to a couple of positive things here? It sounds like they've agreed in principle to an oversight committee, an independent oversight committee. Sounds like we have some successes with Metro. We've gotten this ethics bill passed on HISD. I think and we had this press conference this morning, I think if just everybody in this room brought a couple of our pretty influential friends to a meeting and we met with HISD trustees, even once a month, I think that would go a long way.
Well, we can bring them right here to the show.
Bring them right here to
Y'all
the
can
show.
join us on that. So let's move through the other bonds real quick because we're going to run out of time. If not, we're reading HISD to death here.
They got the most.
They got
It is.
$1.9 billion.
HCC, how are we at with HCC? Houston Community College here in Houston, Texas.
Thumbs up for me.
Absolutely.
Everybody, okay, cool. Metro.
Thumbs up.
Thumbs up.
Hey, you're a
that was a little bit-
contractor. Of course you want all these bonds.
I'm thumbs up on HCC. The educational role that HCC plays in our community is absolutely amazing.
Absolutely.
And I think that programmatically, HCC stands head and shoulders above most community colleges. And I think Houston and our area should be proud of that. And I think that the plans and the vision for expanding makes a lot of sense. So I am a thumbs up with HCC. Metro is another question completely. I have some great consternation.
I do want to ask this question. I mean, what are your thoughts about one of the trustees of HCC, Yolanda Navarro Flores, coming out against the HCC bond?
That's a new one to me. I didn't even know about that.
I was unaware of that.
Well,
Absolutely.
she voted against them.
Well,
at
one of the
board.
things that came up last week was
And she cut a YouTube video.
one of the things that came up last week was I was asking about why aren't the tuition rates paying for these expansion projects? Because from what I understand, other colleges are putting up their tuition rates. And the president mentioned that they haven't raised their tuition. And so I would think that if they haven't raised their tuition, shouldn't that be one of the things that helps fund what is otherwise being asked for as a bond?
So you're saying put it on the backs of the students?
Aren't those the business clients that business is serving?
What's
And any other service, any other business puts their expansion projects on their customers, no?
Well, here's what you need to understand. The Houston Community College generates in excess of $2.5 billion to the local economy. It's not the students that are generating that. It's the college as a
college
district
itself.
that's generating
Right.
that. And if you put all the burden on the students with fees and tuitions, that is unfair. That's not what a democracy is about. We need to spread the burden and doing the bonds of $425 million, and having taxpayers pay a very less than 2.4% per $100 on an increase is insignificant when you think about the economic impact to the region.
I understand the economic impact, but wouldn't like not raising tuition in 5 years impact the money that they're asking for now?
Well, the money that they're asking for are for facilities, to build new facilities. The Coleman College was built 4 or 5 years ago with 1,500 students in mind. They have 3,800 students, and 9 out of 10 students that apply for enrollment in the Coleman College, by the way, are the people who are going to take care of you when you get old and in a nursing home and you need a nurse or a doctor or a tech. Those are the people that are educated in the Coleman College can't get in because there's no room for them. So we need to expand. There are jobs in the oil fields that we need to train workers for. Then once they graduate with a 2-year degree, they start making $70,000, $80,000 a year. Those are real jobs for the real economy, and we need to train the youth of Houston for those jobs. And that's what HCC is doing.
I think very few people are voting independently on the bonds. Like, oh, I'm voting for HCC and against everything else. I think they're either voting for the bonds or they're voting against the bonds en masse. I don't think people are really looking, from what I've seen and heard, people are really not looking at them independently. They're just like, okay, I'm voting for President of the United States.
Yes, sir.
And let me just say yes or no to the bonds.
And I don't agree with him about raising the tuition. We got to keep in mind the students that go to HCC are low-income students who, for whatever reason, XYZ reason, cannot make it to a 4-year degree college, University of Houston. The price difference is significant.
Sure.
And it's more single mothers, younger generation, or people who have been out of college for a long time trying to do something, trying to get an education. So I don't agree with raising the tuition.
And there's also people who are going to HCC to get trained in job skills that they need that are in their 40s and 50s because they need a new job.
Right, they've been out of college.
We're ready to roll this up and go. We got 15 minutes left on the show.
There's 3 races that we need to talk about before the show ends. The first one is, of course, Senator Mario Gallegos. He's on the ballot, even though he's deceased. It's important that we as Democrats, I don't know if everybody here is a Democrat, but we as Democrats need to support Senator Mario Gallegos. If he does, in fact, win, the governor will call a special election for the Senate race. And he has to do that within 20 days of election day.
Of the canvass.
That's correct. And then we're going to wait and see another perhaps 45 to 60 days before the actual election.
Or longer.
Depending on the governor.
It's up to the governor to decide. He has 20 days after the canvass is concluded, and the canvass is concluded in sometime in December, to set the date for a special election. He can set it in January, February, or May, June, July, August, whenever he chooses to.
So the point I'm trying to make to the viewers is that it's important that you go out and you can still vote for the senator, even though he's deceased, and we hope that you do vote for him.
I understand voting for the senator. However, I disagree with it. Because when you're voting for him, you're not voting for him.
Exactly.
You're voting for the person that will be appointed by the Democratic Party.
No one will be.
You're voting for that person. You're not voting for a senator. And what you would be doing is you would be voting on his memory. I happen to know his opponent, R.W. Bray, and this guy, he's real. He's real people. He's an African American, and he's not just for this group of people or for that group of people. He's a person that you can depend on, and you can trust his word.
And it's easy to say, vote for his memory. I was a follower of Mario Gallegos, but it's easy to say if in one way or another there's a personal gain. So we'll just leave it at that. I know R.W. Bray myself, and he's a real person, and I very much agree with what he has to say. I'm not going to say what way I voted. It's either way, but I'm just saying you can't leave the voters to say, vote for a memory when you're not necessarily voting exactly for Mario Gallegos.
Exactly. You're not voting for him at all.
Exactly.
But no one is going to get appointed. If the Senator Gallegos gets reelected, what happens is the governor sets a new date for a new election and new candidates. The Republican can put his name on the ballot again, and whatever Democrats and whoever wants to be on the ballot can be on the ballot. So it goes back to the voters. The voters will decide who the next senator for Senate
Do you
District
think
6
it
will
would be a disadvantage for the Democratic Party? Because there's going to be one candidate from the Republican Party, R.W. Bray, African American. an Air Force, he spent 10 years in the Air Force. He's somebody that you can depend on. You're going to have 3, maybe 4 different Hispanic people running for that. How many ways are you willing to split that vote? Why waste the time and the effort?
Because we live in a democracy and people have the right to vote.
I agree with that. So, but do you think that's a wise election?
So
to split it 4 different ways
amongst
the Latino community?
It's not up to me who decides to run or doesn't run. You know, if I had my way, I would say only one person gets to run. But I don't have my way. I'm not an emperor. So in a democracy, people get to put their name on the ballot, and people get to decide whether they want to choose candidate A, B, C, or D.
I agree with you.
So the laws of the land.
I want to make sure that the people of Senate District 6 get to choose who their next senator is going to be, not because of a death, but because they want to choose the right person. I don't know.
I like that. Very good.
You know, and I think that's the most important thing.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
That's why I think Senator Gallegos needs to get reelected.
So on that note, and on that note, let's move to the next one because we're running out of time.
Second one, Sheriff Garcia. As you all know, he's running at large, countywide. Now, he has a tough race. We have to admit it. There's more Republicans that vote in Harris County than Democrats. So obviously, he needs that crossover vote. It would be a shame if Adrian lost this race.
It would be absolutely a shame. Absolutely a shame, Ben. I think that the job that Sheriff Garcia has done in this brief amount of time is stellar. He is a stand-up individual. He's a person of integrity. The jail numbers are down. The numbers of people that we're sending to other states and paying out of the, Yazoo are down. The sheriff has done a great job. And I think that if he's judged on the merit of his work, whether you're Democrat or Republican, you've got to stay with Sheriff Garcia.
And it's obvious that he's doing a great job. I voted for him. He's loved by not just by Democrats, but also Republicans because of his fairness across the board, leaving all political parties aside.
I agree with you, Bishop. The merit of your work and the content of your character.
Yeah.
That's the reason why you should get the vote.
Yes.
Okay.
You know, I can't hold my mouth here. I'm an activist. I'm an organizer. You probably don't get more liberal than I do, but and I agree with the sheriff on probably 99 out of 100 things. But the thing I disagree with him on is his stance on immigration. So I think we do need to reelect him, but we also need to hold him accountable when it comes to immigration, when it comes to secure communities, when it comes to 287G. He was the only major law enforcement head in this state that didn't campaign against 287G and secure communities. And I think that's really one of the reasons why he's having a lot of trouble, is because he's doing a lot of good things, but why is everybody else in the state, all across the state, campaigning against those, and he's not? So
I can answer that question for you.
No, hold on. I got some little, 287G program, I personally am for it because I have personally seen the benefit of the program. I'm talking about the internal program, not now the street one. I'm totally against. There's two different things we're talking about.
But they come together.
No, they don't come together. There's two different things. You got to understand how the law actually works and the program works and where the funding comes from, because the old
coming together
program.
in its implementation. That's the problem. It's coming together in its implementation. It's whatever the law says.
It doesn't happen that way. Okay,
but that's the way it is happening.
Look at the statistics of the people who actually got deported and actually have gone. Immigration, ICE cannot deport everyone that's actually tagged, okay? It is not that way. They're actually taking out people who are Interpol and picking up criminals that are being searched for worldwide. They're being found here in Harris County. So the process of being, being tagged or searched, no matter who you are or what color you are, because they are finding every single color.
I agree
on
with that.
Process.
I agree with that, but that's not how it's being implemented. It's being implemented. That is being implemented. That is being implemented. But also, you see that these families are getting split up. The president issued this memo of prosecutorial discretion, discretion memos, and they're not being listened to. So
they are being listened to because you have to sit in the immigration court and actually understand what's going on.
There's been studies that have already by local activists here that are showing you that people are getting deported.
We go to extremes here. And as a previous member of LULAC, and we want to give everybody the right to get whatever they want for free, and the other side we want to deport everybody. There's got to be some realistic implementation to immigration.
But
and the fact is there are criminals on the streets.
And he's not implementing it correctly.
How do you know that? Are you sitting inside the jail and seeing who actually gets picked up? Some of the biggest criminals in the drug trade are here in Houston,
I'm not
here in Harris
referring to
County.
those guys. I'm not referring to that. I agree
Just
with
a
that.
disclaimer here, just so you know. Mr. Jose Jimenez worked for the sheriff for many years. Okay,
I
He was
actually
on
reviewed the
inside.
program. I tried to get rid of it.
So,
to be honest with
so
you.
he would probably know a lot more than most of us. But we're running out of time, so
Okay,
we
I'll
got
shut up.
to.
But at the
Well,
end
good
of the
point.
day, the sheriff needs to enforce the laws that are on the books.
Right.
Okay, that's his job, to enforce the laws. We don't like the laws. Let's change the people who write
Make
the
the
laws
laws.
and change the
That's
laws.
right.
As Jose said earlier, we need to change some rules. So let's go change that rule if we don't like it.
Okay, let's go on to the third election. We got
8 minutes.
All right. We can talk about the presidential race, okay? Now, as you all know, the polls show it's a pretty tight race. I want to hear from the bishop. What are your thoughts on this race?
Well, obviously it's very tight, but I think that I'm hoping that President Obama will win the election. I think what's amazing to me is that no one has yet asked the question, why wasn't there any presence of the prior president from Houston in the Republican convention? Why is there such a distance between the front runner now, Mitt Romney, and the immediate past Republican presidencies? Because obviously that presidency sunk the nation's economy. And Barack Obama, President Obama, inherited a deficit and an economy that was absolutely atrocious. He has done more than anyone could have expected under the circumstances. He deserves 4 more years. And I think that the nation is going to see the continual upswing in the economy if we do that. And I'm really appalled, though, by the racist, the racist tone that we hear in public media and in social media. Why can't we have in this nation the right to have an African American running for office, an Anglo running for office, and nothing about race comes up, just as you just said, content of character and the merit of your work?
I agree with you, Bishop. However, I'm not an Obama fan. And
that's too bad.
That's okay.
No, that's
but I've got issues with what's your agenda for the next 4 years. I've got issues with $710 billion taken away from Medicare. That's affecting me right now. It's affecting my mother, my 78-year-old mother right now.
But you really need to stop reading from the talking points of the Republican Party.
That's Romney's talking point.
I'm a Republican.
That's not, but that is not.
I'm probably the sole Republican.
And it's okay.
But I'm concerned about why during the first 2 years, when you have a Democratic Congress, why you didn't act on the DREAM Act. Why you didn't move on that?
Well,
I'm surprised at why, and pardon me, Bishop, no disrespect meaning, when he was vetted by Univision, no response. Univision went through every promise that he went through, that he gave, and he has not followed through with them. I can't, it's about content of character, Bishop.
I cannot say that he's not followed through on any of his promises because he has. I disagree with that statement. The other thing is we've had a Republican Congress and Senate that have just buckled down. If Barack Obama had fed 1 million orphans out of his own pocket, they would have called it a sham. There's nothing he could have done right with a Congress that was dead set against the man, irregardless of his policies. And I think that's the impossible situation that we think miracles should have come forth.
I do a lot of work in the Latino community myself. I'm sorry, Dr. Kerry.
I was just going to speak to your point that why didn't he do anything in those first couple of years when he had the congressional control? And I think the reason is because Obama has always been at Harvard, wherever he was at, even when he was an organizer, he's been known as a consensus builder.
Yes.
And so what he tried to do, to a lot of people, Democrats' disappointments, we tried to build consensus, and we wanted to get Republican input. We wanted to get the Republicans to come on board with the DREAM Act, and he wasn't able to.
Do you think he didn't build a consensus as he was running for president in 2008?
He did.
I think he did.
He did, and he tried to do it
really knew.
But he tried to do it as president, and
one of the
didn't work.
first things that happened after on inauguration day, and I was there, they had a meeting amongst many of the Republicans, Frank Luntz and several others, and they were focused on what they could do to make this president a one-term president.
Yes.
And that came out.
Okay.
And so I agree with him that he tried very, very diligently to build consensus. But when you have individuals that are dead set on whatever you do, Rush Limbaugh saying, I hope all of his policies and I hope he fails. When you have those things coming forth, you had Mitch McConnell and several others said, I want him to fail, I want him to be a one-term president.
But he doesn't run Congress. What happens in Congress is what Congress
laws
does.
are passed, bills are introduced, and laws are passed by Congress.
Absolutely.
By the House
Thank you very
and
much.
the Senate.
And
the president either approves those by signing them into law or vetoes them.
So the fact that you had a Democratic Congress the first 2 years and you didn't get something passed, what happened?
Oh, they did pass
We're
something.
talking about
I think that your party calls it Obamacare.
Obamacare.
and they passed quite a number of legislation. Here's the facts. I agree with Bishop Dixon. I think there's a lot of racism at stake here that's been very subtle in America for the last 4 years. One of my neighbors told me on Halloween Day that he wasn't going to vote for him because he was black. And I said, well, you know, he's half white. So if you don't like the part that's black, why don't you vote for the part that's white? And he looked at me and he didn't know what to say when I said that. And then he started attacking me on issues, and he used the same thing about Medicare, about the $710 million. I said, what the president,
that's B
billion.
B, right.
I said, what the president did was cut out waste in the Medicare Advantage program. Okay, he didn't take it away.
Passed
by Congress.
But under whose administration?
Under the previous administration.
Under this administration, we have $16 trillion in debt now.
So I said, well, there is $16 trillion in debt, and if you go back, if you go back 12 years, there was zero debt left by the last Democratic president, Bill Clinton. He left us in a surplus.
And it's ridiculous to think that we shouldn't have any debt in a
The last
recession.
Republican president took a surplus and put $6 trillion into debt and started this downfall in the economy. So there is nothing we can do about it except we can either say we're going to change horses in mid-stride, which is what the Republicans want to do, or continue the course we're at. Has President Obama done all the right things? No. But he's done far superior than his competitor, because his competitor every week seems to change his mind on what he's going to do.
You know, and we can go back and forth. We all have difference of opinions. We all think one should vote for Obama and the other one is, you know, for Romney. At the end of the day, all we need is for people to go out and vote.
I think the president's going to win with an excess of 300 electoral college votes.
And that's fine. We all have difference of opinion when it comes down to it. But just get out and vote. That's the most important thing. You have that right. Use that right.
We had less than 1 minute left. We close this out.
I was just going to say I was very disappointed in the minister's pulpit Sunday who came out to use that as a means to talk about President Obama being a Muslim and not speaking on the Mormonism issue.
Well, on that note, we're going to have to close out. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. Hopefully we can come back next week or to see how it goes. But you are watching Latino Talk TV. Go out and vote tomorrow. Do whatever you do, get up, get out there, and go vote, okay? There's nothing more